Good afternoon, everyone. We are here to give you the afternoon briefing about a horrible event that you all followed with us from January the 3rd. And let me go back and refresh your memory. On January the 3rd at between 1:30 and 1:45 in the afternoon, a horrific event occurred at 7462 Berkeley Road in Polk City, where we found one person who we later determined to be William or Bill Reiss, who was deceased from a horrific murder, and a friend that lived with him by the name of Kenneth Mayer was shot and left for dead at the residence. If you remember, at that time, we talked about how Kenneth had staggered out to the road, was leaning on to a large garbage utensil and trying to flag down help. 3 Good Samaritans stopped to help him, summoned EMS and certainly the sheriff's office, and he began to deteriorate. EMS rushed him to the hospital, where at Lakeland Regional Health he underwent surgeries and was in tremendously critical condition. Well, I'm here to report to you today he's still in tremendously critical condition. We don't see any improvement. We're praying for the best, and I'll give you some more information on that in just a minute. But I can tell you at this hour he's fighting for his life. So our homicide detectives began their investigation, and I'm going to give you a synopsis of what we found out and where we arrived, and I'm also going to tell it to you as it began. And here's how it began. There was a hurricane, Hurricane Irma, in 2017. It did great damage to Polk County. Subsequent to that hurricane, FEMA, through their contractor, Vanguard, sent some subcontractors in to do damage assessments. And what we found out was Jerwan Jackson did damage assessments for FEMA. And he went to Bill's house. And he did a damage assessment, and he learned at that time that Bill had a collection of firearms and frequently sold firearms. So about 2 weeks after the damage assessment, Jerwan came back to the house and he bought 2 .45 caliber handguns from Bill Reiss. Then he returned to Alabama. Sometime after arriving in Alabama, he was arrested for improper possession of those 2 firearms. Time went on, and Jerwan told some of his buddies, hey, I know where we can go hit a lick, where we can commit a robbery, where we can get a lot of firearms. And he told his buddy, Kenley Campbell and Darrell Rankins, come on, let's go to Florida. And they conspired. They set their plans to leave Mobile, Alabama, in a small gray Chevy Sonic and drive all the way to Polk City, Florida, which they did. They arrived on January the 3rd at between 1:30 and 1:40 in the afternoon. And while they were riding down to Florida, they talked about the robbery, and they were going to rob if conditions were right. If not, he had the money to buy a gun. And along the way, Jerwan told his 2 counterparts, Darrell Rankin and Kenley Campbell, he said, I tell you what, I'm just going to kill him. And they arrived. Darrell Rankin stayed in the car with Kenley Campbell, and Jerwan went to the door. Well, Jerwan knew our victim. Jerwan had purchased guns from our victim, so the victim obviously opened the door and let him in and went back and apparently sat in his chair, his lounge chair. A conversation occurred, and we don't know what that is because neither of them are here to tell us that. We know what Jerwan said, and he pulled a gun and promptly shot Bill. Shot him 4 times in the head and once in the hand. But he didn't just shoot him 4 times in the head and once in the hand. He said he shot him once and noticed that he was suffering, so he continued to shoot him because he didn't want him to suffer. When the shooting was occurring, then Kenneth hears the noise of the gunshots in the living room, and he comes into the living room, and Jerwan starts shooting him and shoots him twice in the head, shoots him once in the shoulder and I think once in the arm, shoots him 4 times, and he goes down. Well, Daryl and Kenley, who are waiting on the signal to come on in and get the stuff, hear the gunshots. Jerwan comes outside and tells them, "Come on in." They go inside, and we think, we don't have an accurate tally because obviously we've not been able to recover, but we think these 3 murderers stole someplace around 20 or 25 firearms. In addition to the 20 or 25 firearms, they stole a flat screen TV. They stole enough property that it wouldn't all fit in the trunk of their Chevrolet. So they go, well, we'll steal the victim's car or truck. So they stole the victim's blue pickup truck, which there's a before and after picture. That's what it looked like when they drove it away from Polk City. And that's what it looked like after Jerwan torched it in Mobile, Alabama. So they robbed, packed up, and drove directly back to Mobile, Alabama. They arrived in Mobile, Alabama. Our detectives, our homicide detectives, which are simply the very best in the business. Have I mentioned to you lately it's been 8 years since we had an unsolved homicide? We have, for the last 8 years, solved 100% of our homicides. They began the investigation, and here's what they determined. They determined that both of our victims were shot with a .25 caliber, what we believe to be a semi-automatic pistol, and we have recovered one that met that description. We don't know if it is the firearm until we send it to the lab, and that will occur. But they tracked these guys from Polk City, Florida to Mobile, Alabama. And here's how they did it. We cannot say enough good things about the people of this community and the business owners of this community because guess what? Surveillance video of residences and businesses showed us that our suspects immediately left northbound on Berkeley Road to Highway 33 in Polk City, where they turned and made it east and then a northeast streak up Highway 33 through Groveland. From Groveland they went on Highway 50 and they worked their way back Highway 50 toward the north end of the state and ultimately back to Mobile, Alabama. It was an amazing piece of work by the detectives. They immediately contacted the Mobile Police Department and said, hey, we need some help. The Mobile, Alabama Police Department was just absolutely fantastic. They piled in and helped us. We identified Darrell Rankin, Jerwan Jackson, and Kenley Campbell as being the people who arrived in the Chevrolet and departed in the Chevrolet and the Dodge Ram. Kenley and Darrell are only 22 years old. The murderer is 18 years old. So here's what happened. We arrived in Alabama and we figured out that the owner of the car was Kenley. So we worked and we were able to arrest Kenley and Darrell, and both of them confessed. They told us exactly what they did. And they go, we aren't the shooter. Jerwan Jackson is the shooter. Well, of course, as detectives, they think, yeah, that's convenient. He's not here to tell his story, but that's okay. They confessed. They're the ones that said, Jerwan said, here's where we can go hit a lick. Kenley said, I've got the car. They put their plan together. They drove to Florida. Jerwan says, wait here for me because Bill already knows me. I purchased guns from him legally. Jerwan was not a convicted felon. Bill appropriately and legally sold that gun on the aftermarket. Jerwan knew that Bill would let him into the house. After all, he was trusted because he showed up as a FEMA rep through a contractor. So it's a perfect deal. We recovered, as a result of the initial arrest, 6 firearms. We can confirm that 3 of those firearms are certainly stolen from Bill at that residence. The other firearms, we've not made a confirmation of where they came from yet. We recovered the vehicle that was dumped and burned. We made that the initial arrest on January 6th. Did you hear me? January 6th. Only 3 days after the murder in Alabama, we already had 2 of them in custody. So Jerwan was hiding from us. We found him with the help of the Marshal Service. Can't say enough good about the Marshal Service. We ran him to ground and arrested him. Jerwan told us the truth, at least his version of the truth. He confessed, and we said, well, who was the shooter? Fully expecting him to go, they're the shooters. He said, no, I was the shooter. He admitted that he shot and murdered Bill, and he shot and left Kenneth for dead. He then said that when they arrived in Alabama that he sold the guns and the flat screen television on the streets in Mobile and burned the truck up. We have recovered the clothing we believe was used in the murder, guns, rubber gloves that they actually purchased and took with them to the murder. We've recovered about 1,000 rounds of ammunition, obviously their electronic devices. We have recovered what we think is clothes with our victim's blood on it. Now here's the thing that's interesting. So the murder weapon, where did it come from? Kenley bought that murder weapon on the streets of Mobile and then sold it to Jerwan for about $25. So it was a street gun to begin with. All 3 of them are charged with first-degree murder and all kinds of other charges, and are now in the Metro County Jail in Mobile, Alabama. Interestingly enough, we don't have their juvenile records, but when you look at their adult records, both Daryl, Juwan, and Kinley, these guys don't have a long, violent, extensive record that we can see unless there's one in the juvenile system. But their adult charges are relatively mild. They don't fit the normal, what we call horrific murderer. And that's what they did. They calculated and planned this very carefully. I can only imagine that they were shocked when only 3 days later, here's the Polk County Sheriff's detectives in Mobile, Alabama, putting them in handcuffs. I can tell you that when you look at this case, as I've had the opportunity to be involved in it, and you see here's two guys minding their own business, no one out here selling drugs, violating the law, just the man he's a hobbyist and he buys and sells guns, perfectly legal. We've not seen that he did any illegal purchases or sales. He deals with somebody who FEMA sends out with appropriate identification, and the sale went fine. He had no way to know when he sold those two guns for $800 that that guy was going to come back and murder him and try to murder Kenneth and take all of his guns. But that's exactly what happened. So the investigation goes on. We still have the science that we have to plug into this case. But when you look at how awesome this case came together, and you understand that our state attorney's office, the prosecutors assigned to this were phenomenal, because we were doing probable cause affidavits and building probable cause through our different pieces of the puzzle we were putting together. The state attorney's office was working with us around the clock. Had it not been for our state attorney being all in and being accessible to us 24/7 and giving us all these arrest warrants and search warrants on the fly, we'd still be up there in Mobile trying to figure this thing out. But it's a great case, and it's going to get even better once we get our science back from the labs. Is there any questions?
Sheriff, why? Why? Armed robbery is one thing. First degree murder, you said these guys don't have a past like this.
Yeah, why is the question for all of us. I mean, they talked about, and Juwan told them, I think I'll just kill him on the way to Florida. I mean, they could have robbed him of those firearms and left. Of course, the problem is with that, he knows that Juwan was a licensed subcontractor doing a FEMA job, so obviously that would lead to who he was. So he thought, in my estimation from experience, if I'm going to rob this guy, I got to kill him. I can't leave him alive, or they'll know who I am. But they planned, or at least Juwan told Daryl and Kinley, and they did nothing to stop it and continued on to commit this horrific crime, knowing that they were going to kill this man or men, I don't know if he knew that two of them were there, whenever he arrived.
Yeah, our Facebook friends are chiming in. They're asking, how many people did this guy have contact with in the area? How many?
Yeah, we don't.
Other?
Well, and quite frankly, we don't know that yet, because our total investigation from January the 3rd has been to chase the suspects and grab the evidence. Now we'll go backward. And we're also interested in providing all of this to the people in the Mobile, Alabama area, because, and all over the Southeast, I mean, did he hit a lick out in Texas with a hurricane out there and figure out, hey, here's somebody to hit out here? I mean, he traveled a long distance, what, 12, 13 hours? And turned around and drove straight back.
Sheriff, I understand how you were able to track the cars, but how were you able to identify the 3 people? Did you get them on camera or what?
Well, it took a great deal of intense investigative follow-up. We ran the tag registration. It's registered to him.
Registered to who?
Kinley.
Kenna.
Kinley.
Kenna, yeah.
And from there, it just pieced together.
What did FEMA have to say about all this?
FEMA has not had anything to say about it. We did notify the contractor that we were going to wear him and FEMA out this afternoon. We're still in the phone queue at FEMA, but I bet they'll see it and call us back after today.
You have to be wondering how he.
You can tell FEMA, we've been trying to call you, but you know, customer service is like, you don't answer your phones.
You have to wonder how he could get that position, how he could interact with people.
He's 18 years old. He's an adult. FEMA's got to put a lot of people on the ground in order to do these damage assessments quickly so that they can help. I don't know what kind of backgrounds they did. That's a question for them, if you can get them to answer their phone.
But did he have any background in construction or anything that would?
I have no idea. We haven't done any of the background on their experience or their training or any of that at this time. But we do know this, that the contractor and FEMA gave him the credibility to get to the house, to be involved in the process. Now, in defense of them, they had no way in the world to know. And they couldn't have looked at a criminal history and have had any way in the world to know that this guy was capable to be so violent to come back and do this. Because the information we have of record, and I don't know whether or not it was available to FEMA during a background investigation or the FEMA contractor, but I don't know if that was available to them, but even if they'd have seen it, it was like, no big deal. These people did not meet what we traditionally think of as the fit the mold of the person who's normally a vicious, relentless, cold-blooded murderer. But that's what Jerwan Jackson was. And Darrell Rankin and Kenley Campbell, that's what they were. Cold-blooded, vicious, calculated murderers.
These guys drove from Alabama all the way to here. Do you believe that this was one-stop shopping, or obviously the investigation is continuing? Do you think that they may have made other stops, possibly burglaries, went into other houses that this guy knew?
We don't know. It appears that this was a direct trip to Polk City and a direct trip back, but this is just one day. How many other direct trips did they make throughout the Southeast or throughout the hurricane-ravaged areas? And you had Texas that was just a few weeks before that. We don't know, and it would be presumptuous of us to state that. But we will be following up to finish dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Other questions?
There were hundreds of these contractors in Florida, during the storm, and if you can't trust them, FEMA, I guess, or the contractor protecting the people here, I mean, what do you tell the people? Because they can't just not let people into their homes who are supposed to be trusted. Certainly,
Juwan was an aberration. I mean, most of the FEMA people that came here were honest people trying to help. But you understand where we're all sensitive. All but one that we know of were here to help people during a desperate time when they were at their weakest point. But here's one subcontractor that took the opportunity to not only buy the guns, but to figure out there's lots of guns here and I can steal them all. And you can't rationalize that because he in his mind knew he had to kill this man or men, because otherwise, it is a big, broad highway from the suspect to the victim if you just go rip off his firearms, because we know who he is. We got all kinds of FEMA documents. Firearms.
I was gonna ask, do you have any idea about, like, the street value? I mean, it's hard to, I'm sure, calculate exactly what that would be, but the street value roughly of those 20 to 25 firearms? Like, what they thought they were going to get?
No, what they were going to do is turn around and sell them on the streets, and I have no idea what they were going to sell them on the streets for, but you know, you understand that if you have 20 firearms and they bring you, you know, $300 or $400 or $500, in our world, it's not a lot of money. Maybe they thought 20 or 25 firearms was going to make them some kind of rich, but it got them in some kind of jail for the rest of their lives. These folks are done. These folks are vicious, calculated murderers, and our goal is to make sure they never walk the face of the earth free again, where they'll have the opportunity to murder others. And like I said, we've got one murder now, one attempted murder, and he's literally fighting for his life every day. And we're told, and it's limited information that I can give you, that he is still extremely, extremely critical.
How worried are you? You only recovered 6 guns. You fear there might be 25 or more out in the streets. How worried are you about that?
There's a possibility that Mobile has approximately another 15 to 20 firearms on the streets of Mobile, Alabama, and they didn't go to Sunday school teachers. They went to criminals and criminal elements, and will show up at some point in time in and around Mobile and maybe across the United States involved in some other criminal conduct. We also have with us today Bill's daughter, Katrina Urso. She lives in Tampa. Katrina and her family came to be with us today to hear the press conference and hear for the first time the details as I've described them to you, although our homicide detectives have been in close touch with her. But Katrina is ready to come speak to you all today. Katrina, you want to come on up? And her husband.
A lot of information, and I'm so appreciative to the sheriff's office. Y'all are, I couldn't imagine this going longer. He didn't deserve this. And I'm grateful that they were caught, and we can just start to mourn my dad, grandpa, son. It's unreal. He was a good man.
I asked the sheriff, is it difficult not knowing why this happened?
He was the biggest teddy bear. He wouldn't have hurt anyone. He wouldn't have. It's amazing to me. I'll always live with why. I don't know.
How upsetting is that to know that this was a FEMA subcontractor?
My dad, he's really big into ham radios, and he would help people, like for Hurricane Andrew. He would go for hurricane relief and like set up the communication and it's kind of ironic that that's, but he wouldn't want people to think, oh, it's bad. I mean, there are good people.
Do you know how long he was selling guns?
It was a hobby.
Recent?
It was a hobby. It was my whole life. It was gun safety. Like, my brother was a explorer, and like it was just my kids. It was very. He was an advocate, like being safe and being responsible, and he wasn't a gun collector, and he had a lot. He's like, I don't need all these, so he started, but it was not like something he advertised to everyone. He was very conscious about like being safe and being responsible, and so it wasn't like that was his job. It was just he loved. It was
But
a
he
collection.
had been selling them as long as you know.
he didn't sell like all the time. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, it was just, he had a lot,
Okay.
you know, and he's like, I don't need all of them, I'll start getting rid of them.
How do you wrap your head around the fact that this was someone who was supposed to be helping him and then could turn around and do the exact opposite of that?
To be honest, it makes more sense because I'm like, he's a smart man. He's not just going to let anyone in his house. He's not going to invite a stranger, here, come look at my guns. He wouldn't do that. So it kind of makes me feel a little better to know that, like, that piece of the puzzle, that wasn't him. And now he trusted someone, and this man's here to help me. And I help people in the hurricane. That makes sense. It makes so much more sense. It's hurtful. There's bad people in the world. Not everyone's bad.
What do you want people to know about your dad?
He was a good man. He was a great grandfather. He loved motorcycles. He loved Facebook quizzes. He liked, and Ken is an amazing man. He has treated my kids like they're his grandkids, and they didn't deserve this. Gentle teddy bears, and a lot of information to process, but it's awful.
Was Ken his caregiver?
Ken was his best friend, and they were roommates, and Ken, I don't know what he was such a good friend. He did take care of him. It wasn't a job, it was a friendship, and they're both, yeah, he's a good man.
How long had he lived?
I'm not sure. 5 years, I mean, they've been friends for a long time.
Okay. Any other questions?
Can you spell your last name for us, please?
URSO.
URSO?
Mm-hmm.
And it's Katrina, K-A-T-R-I-N-A.
And you live where?
Tampa.
Okay, the investigation goes on. We still have to put the reports together, dot the i's, cross the t's, get the science back from the labs, work with the state attorney's office. We'll continue to work with the victims and keep them in our prayers, and we certainly are keeping Kenneth in our prayers now because he is exceptionally critical, and we have absolutely no idea whether he's going to make it or not.
Sheriff, can you, how long were you able to track these vehicles? All the way back to Mobile, just out of the Polk?
You know, that's an absolute great question, but we're going to keep some things a secret for now.
Can you tell us how many?
More than just the Polk County border, would that be a fair statement?
Well, if I were to tell you, that might be a fair statement, but I'm not going to tell you.
Are there any federal authorities involved? I mean, other obviously than like FEMA was somewhere involved in this
Yeah.
situation.
No.
Not the marshals, not
The marshals helped us catch our third suspect. The marshals were totally awesome. As you know, we have one of our deputies on the marshals task force. The marshals are the best in the country at catching wanted people. And when we wanted them, the marshals piled in there with us and with Mobile PD, and working together, we got them in custody.
Do you know where he was?
He had a couple of residences, but he was near one of his residences, actually in the car with his brother, who had an outstanding warrant, and his mother at the time of his arrest. And by the way, the work was remarkable. The fact that Mobile PD has their own caseload. They've got significantly more homicides than we do, but they stopped their work to help us, and I can't say enough good about that. But this could have been a very challenging case, except for the talent of our people and operating with a sense of urgency. And it absolutely, when you go looking at what we call the profile of a vicious murderer, these three guys don't meet the prerequisites to be put in that position, but they are now. They're now cold-blooded, calculated, vicious murderers.
And just to clarify, he had no criminal record that FEMA could have found?
There was some criminal record, but it was minor as an adult. I don't know if he had a juvenile record. It's not accessible to us.
Say minor, like shoplifting?
Yeah, we can get that to you. We'll get it to you. It's pretty minor.
So could you see why FEMA would accept him as a contractor?
You'll have to ask FEMA why they accepted him as a contractor. I can tell you that, you know, and on balance, you got to understand that FEMA came in here and did a lot of good work. And if FEMA had have been able to tell in advance that this guy was a calculated murderer, they certainly wouldn't have hired him. And he had done nothing that I see at that point to give anybody any indication that he was capable of doing that.
Sheriff, can you tell us just approximately how many surveillance videos you looked at in terms of businesses?
More than one.
Hundreds?
More than one.
Dozens?
More than one.
All right.
Can you tell us, before we wrap up, can you tell us?
I can, maybe I can, and maybe I can't.
Are the men still in Alabama, or are they here now?
The men are still in Alabama at this time.
When will they be extradited?
Whenever the paperwork is processed, and they also have a right in Alabama to fight extradition or waive extradition. If they waive extradition, they will arrive in Polk County sooner. If they fight extradition, it will take longer because there will have to be some court hearings to move them across the state
Can
line.
you give us the name of the contractor who hired him? And
I've-
was he based in Polk County?
Yeah, the contractor was Vanguard.
Vanguard,
Vanguard.
here in Polk?
Vanguard, I think it's a national company, but if you'll call Vanguard, they will answer their phone, unlike FEMA. Okay?
A local office?
Well, you know, I don't,
Vanguard what?
Vanguard contractors for FEMA. We'll get the information to you.
There might be some ID information on the photos we sent out to them, so you guys will have, should have shot your photos.
You can get a shot of all of our photos. These were crafted with you in mind.
Me in mind?
Yes.
Now, this is.
Oh, I forgot, and here's some of the guns, by the way, if you want the guns.
Was that for me too?
This is for you.
Okay.
It's special for you. All right. I forgot to show you pictures of some of the recovered firearms. There they are.
Are those the stolen ones, Sheriff?
Stolen guns recovered, if y'all want a picture of those. All right? Y'all are awesome. Thank you very much. Have a great day. I appreciate you.